Thank you again for having me back. And the speakers were really great. It was I thought, a very good conference, very focused, everyone really contributed. Um, in terms of the big picture, I mean, I actually give credit to anthropology. My training is an anthropologist in order to do that, because what anthropology does is it goes from the micro to the macro. You go in and you look at a particular neighborhood or a village or a community, and you research it in all this detail. But then the question is, okay, what does all this mean? And then you go back to theory as I said, in the opening of the conference, I think what ICAHD has tried to do over the years as a political organization, also activist, also resistance, also advocacy, but as a political organization that's really committed to trying to get to a resolution of this whole issue. We've really taken an anthropological approach from the point of view of focusing on one particular aspect of the occupation and of the colonialism, which is house demolitions. We've talked about quite a bit, but then going from there to say, okay, as I said, house demolitions are a vehicle for understanding what Israel's intentions are, and for really getting at, in a sense, to bridge or to link what's happening on the ground, which obviously is a symptom, and it's an expression of a wider policy. It isn't just happening reactively on the ground. There's a logic to it. There's a pattern to it. There's a purpose to what's going on, and that, I think, is what ICAHD has tried to do. In other words, follow the trail from the demolition of Atta Jabar's house all the way to settler colonialism, and how do we get out of this whole thing? And so activism, resistance are crucial. The human rights work that Salah and Umar and others are doing is crucial, the educational work. But the missing element I think of today's discussion, of course, is the need for a political program. In other words, all of these things contribute and are key, are necessary, essential to ending this whole situation. I'm avoiding the word conflict because in our settler colonial analysis, this isn't colonialism is not a conflict involving two sides. It's unilateral. But in this struggle, I think it's very important that that we begin to focus on the bigger picture, that we begin to see how these things come together. So I just want to show you a couple, look at a couple slides to make this more visual and more obvious. Can you see this on the screen? Wait, I didn't do, all right, 1 minute. All right, I didn't do share, wait a minute, I have to, okay, here we go. Now, okay, right. Now you see this? I can't hear anybody.
Yes, yes,
okay,
Jeff,
okay,
yes.
Fine. Well, I mean, basically, as we know, again, well, as we have to begin with the idea that Zionism was a settler colonial movement. That's really key. That's not just some academic idea, but this is really key to the analysis. And that is, of course, in settler colonialism, it's when a foreign population comes to a targeted country with the intention of taking it over. So Zionism came to Palestine with the intention of taking over the country, of transforming an Arab country into a Jewish country, transforming Palestine into Israel. Not 78% of it, as this two-state solution on the left map kind of shows, but the whole thing. And that's why, of course, we've always said in ICAHD that the two-state solution is not only dead under the weight of settlements and so on, but it was never alive, because the whole idea that Zionists, and Zionism is still, the guiding principle of the purpose of Israel. If the whole purpose was to take over the entire country and to Judaize it, based on the claim of exclusivity, that this country, and Umar was talking about that before, based on the idea that this country belongs exclusively to one particular national group, and that is, of course, the Jews, and that not only does it belong to the Jews exclusively, there is no other claimant, but that the Palestinians don't even constitute a people or a national entity with national rights, means that there was never a two-state solution option. Israel would never have recognized the Palestinians as a people with rights of self-determination that deserve even a mini-state in the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza. But, you know, Israel would not have allowed another nation, let's say, to have a state in the heart and the belly of its own country. This goes against the entire principle of Zionism, which again is to take the entire country, and particularly, you might say, what we call Judea and Samaria and Jerusalem, the West Bank, because this is the heart of the biblical land. So that the two-state solution. So where is Israel going then? Well, what's interesting is Israel itself, obviously, then from the very beginning of 140 years ago, had a one-state idea in mind. Israel never signed on to the two-state idea, not even in Oslo. And it's always had a one-state idea, which is best represented maybe by the map on the right, which is basically Israeli control of the entire country. With now and what Salah said is absolutely true. There's no, not only is there no contradiction between settler colonialism and apartheid, but apartheid is the obvious and necessary outcome of settler colonialism, because settler colonialism means we want to take the country, we want to take the land, right? We want to normalize this country as ours, as Israel. Well, what do you do then when a large part of the population, in our case, the majority population, the Palestinians today are the majority population in historic Palestine between the Mediterranean and the Jordan River? What do you do with them? Well, obviously you try to expel, displace as many as you can, and Israel did succeed in the Nakba in displacing and driving out what's become half the Palestinian population today. It was 85% of the Palestinians living in what became Israel within the 1948 borders, but Israel couldn't succeed at that. As a matter of fact, Rabin saw the Six-Day War as an opportunity to finish 1948. 1948 is not finished for Israel. This isn't just past history. These are all very important ingredients in understanding the present situation. They're still very active parts of the political picture. So that what you do then is you have to have apartheid. If you want all the land, but you're stuck with this native population, well, then you have to create Bantustans. And that's these images in the orange here that are basically, if you take out, in other words, if I can just show one more slide here. It's not, all right. All right, if at any rate, if you, these are based on areas A, B, and Gaza, the orange areas. So the vast majority, I think it's like 90% or so, 94% even of the Palestinians in the occupied territory are confined to areas A and B. And you can see also, this weird kind of a form of this orange area is created by the wall. This is the way the wall works. So they're very well defined, these Bantustans, and of course Gaza, which is a closed area. What I'm going to do for 1 minute, is just go back to this slideshow, because I think I can go. It shows the other slides. hopefully. So here, so that and you can see very well how Israel has created this Bantustan. In other words, the Bantustans, with the orange areas on that map, are the brown areas on this map. Area A, of course, is the darker brown. Area B is the lighter brown. But you can see the pink areas on this map.
We can't see. We can't see. Did you try to bring up another map?
Okay, I'm sorry. I have to do the shares. I'm sorry. I'm embarrassed by my technological primitivity. All right, now we're back. In other words, what I'm trying to show is this map, the orange map. You see the orange Bantustans within a greater Israel, and how they're basically created, and that is, of course, these brown areas that are areas A and B of the West Bank, and then Gaza. The pink areas here are what we call settlement blocks. We don't talk much about settlement blocks in our analyses, and we should. They're more important than the settlements. The settlements are the blue areas. You see, there's all kinds of little discrete settlements, but in fact, Israel's consolidating them into coherent blocks of settlements. You see one on the right that goes along the Jordan River, the Jordan Valley that Rashid talked about this morning. You have the one on the left, on the green line between Israel and the West Bank, which is a massive settlement block. And then in the middle that connect the two, you have Ariel. So you have like an H form there. Jerusalem has become a huge region, not just a city. And then you have the settlement coming up from the settlement block coming up from the north into Hebron. And that, of course, creates then these three Bantustan areas in the north, in the center, and in the south, and then Gaza. And that, as I said before, is then given concrete, literally concrete form by the root of the wall. See how the wall comes in like this, and that really makes a real border. I mean, you can see where the Bantustans are. So that's what creates this map here of the apartheid. It's really an apartheid map. And house demolitions then plays a key role. This is a map that was done for us by a Swiss cartographer, and it's very graphic. I mean, if you see over the years, now this is just between 2004 and today, 2021, but you can see the patterns. I mean, it's all red and a few other colors of demolitions. These are a map of demolitions in the same areas. Actually, if this went back further than 2004, there'd be much more red along this area to the right of the West Bank. But you can still see very much the map of the settlement blocks and the house demolitions. The point of house demolitions then being to take the Palestinian population that's in Area C. See, that's in the 62% of the West Bank that Israel wants. That's in gray and pink on this map, and push them into areas A and B. In other words, what Israel is willing to settle for is 85% of the land. This is very much like South Africa. In South Africa, the whites had 89% of the land, and the black Bantustans were 11%. Here you've got Israel then on 85%, but controlling the entire country. I mean, you obviously control the Bantustan population. It's not that they have really a state of their own. Although, again, this is part of Israel's strategy. Israel says, you know what? If you want to call the Palestinian Authority a state, fine, do it. That actually helps us, because then we can say, yes, there is a two-state solution. Look, there's a Palestinian state. There's a Palestinian Authority. There's a Palestinian president. There's a parliament. The Palestinians, Abu Mazen himself calls himself the president of Palestine. The United Nations has recognized Palestine as a state. So great, this is it. It doesn't have to be this state. It doesn't have to be actual apartheid. In fact, this lets Israel off the hook by by enabling it to present apartheid as a two-state solution. We have to be very careful that we don't play into that. But the house demolition issue then, and this is where we're obviously able then to make that connection between house demolitions on the ground and Israel's intent in terms of its political purpose. And that's then what leads us into our settler colonial analysis, and which leads us into a political program. Because the political program has to come out not only of Palestinian aspirations, but it has to deal with how do you actually dismantle a colonial regime? How do you dismantle an apartheid situation? So that it's not only the idea of liberation and what kind of a state do we want in the future, what's our political program in the future, but it also has to do with how do we dismantle the colonial situation we have today in order to get to that. And so in the One Democratic State campaign that ICAHD has played a very important role in, actually Salah and Umar are part of the One Democratic State campaign as well. So, you know, we've got some very, very important Palestinian activists and intellectuals that are also thinking in terms of the big picture. You know, where are we going with all of this? You know, we're all engaged in different aspects of the liberation struggle, but at the same time, I think a lot of us are beginning to understand that we're not going to. All that's inadequate without a political program. You can't be in a political struggle without a political program. And so, without getting into details, because I have to finish, you know, basically, I think the image that we have of a one democratic state is basically a state of equal rights for all its citizens, a constitutional democracy, one citizenship, one government, one parliament, one legal system, equal rights for everyone. Of course, the right of return of Palestinian refugees, that's crucial. And not only do they have the right of return, but they have the civil status to return. They should return, because just because you've been driven out of your country or you fled your country during a war doesn't mean you lose your civil status. If Ukrainians are fleeing today to Poland, doesn't mean they stop being Ukrainians. So Palestinian refugees never stopped being citizens of this country. They never lost their civil identity, and that's an even stronger case for bringing them back than the right. They also have the right, but they also are citizens of the country. We're also, you know, respecting, obviously, because we realize there's national groups here too. Palestinian Arabs and Israeli Jews are national groups, and so we have to give expression to that, but within the framework of a civic country. And finally, what I'll say, there's more, but finally what I'll just say is that the idea then is not only to create one state in a technical sense, but I think the vision is to have emerge what we call a political community, a new civil, not just a civil society by itself, but a new kind of us. And I think the good news is that I think if we do get to this kind of a situation through struggle, I think what happens with young people is they begin to forget very quickly all these conflicts. I think within a half a generation, we would have a new kind of a civil identity beginning to emerge from all of this. So that's sort of the connection between house demolitions and the big picture, you know, and the importance of a political program that I think this One Democratic State campaign plan is a good first step towards. It's just an outline, of course, and it has to be bought in. You know, the Palestinians have to buy into it, and the Palestinian members of our group are in the process of getting it out to the Palestinian community. This has to be Palestinian plan, but nonetheless, I think it's a good, solid start to that kind of a process.
So the final, the point in the chat, has the One Democratic State, One Democratic Solution been discussed or presented to any of the UK parliamentarians or parliamentary groups or committees? They all state they're in favour of the two-state solution, and we get no further.
Well, that's right. And I mean, we're in the, I think ICAHD UK is working on that all the time. We're trying to work with parliamentarians and civil society and others in terms of the one state idea, because ICAHD in general and all our groups has adopted that as a political plan. The thing about the two-state solution, look, everybody knows the two-state solution is gone. Or as we said, it's never alive. You don't have to agree with that if you don't want to, but everybody knows it's dead. Boris Johnson knows it's dead. Biden knows it's dead. Bennett knows, everybody knows. But so why are they clinging to it? Because it's a great tool of conflict management. In other words, nobody wants to expend the political capital that you would need to get into a fight with Israel and a fight with the Jewish community and the fight with the media and the fight with the Christians and everything else that you see. I mean, who wants to put themselves in the situation of Jeremy Corbyn, where you're critical of Israel and then you get hit with anti-Semitism and you get thrown out of your party and you're vilified. I mean, for most politicians, they say, well, why do I need that? I'll either shut up on this issue, which is the best thing I can do, or if I have to speak out because it is an issue and ICAHD UK is pushing me all the time and so on. If I do, all right, the best thing to say is a two-state solution. Then it doesn't commit me to anything. I say everything to right. I'm for Israeli rights. I'm for Palestinian rights. We're negotiating. We're looking for negotiations. We're committed to it. International. You throw everything into the pot, but it's an illusion. It's not going to happen, and nobody expects it to happen. But it's enough to say there's a process, a peace process. We're negotiating. We're in favor of Palestinian rights, of course, and that just lets you off the hook. So in a sense, it's a conversation. Well, it's not a real conversation because they're not really engaged in trying to. They don't want to resolve this issue because it's simply too expensive for them politically.